I'd known I was going to be on kind of a TV thing going up to Birmingham, I would have had my hair and nails done before I showed up. So, I am Mike Parsons, somewhat involved in educational issues. Dee Vocal over there has been always supportive and very helpful. She's extreme conservative and she fits right in with my group. Back there at the table, George Berry, another very religious and extremely conservative person that believes money isn't everything, values and principles are. Ed Hill back there, one of my mentors, is with me also. So I have some friends here, so don't throw apples or oranges or tomatoes at me while I'm speaking. They've been told to grab me and rush me out the door if y'all start harassing me. I'm kind of surprised when I was talking to Rebecca, you know, that she would be so receptive to me coming to talk to you. What I have found with a lot of these groups, especially Republican groups, is if you don't have a title, they don't really want to hear you. They throw someone out there with a title to bring the crowds in. Well, I'm not a senator and I'm not a House rep. I don't really have a title except Mike. I go by Mike. I can recognize that pretty good. But speaking of titles, let's talk about somewhat of a history lesson before we get into the meat of this. 2010, two things happened. In 2010, the Alabama State Department of Education said they were going to transition to a thing called Common Core State Standards. Now, a lot of other processes and things came in with that. You just didn't get a bunch of standards. But also what happened in 2010 is we all of a sudden had a supermajority in the House and Senate in Montgomery of so-called conservative Republicans. Now, at that time, according to the National Assessment of Education Progress, NAEP, I believe Alabama was around 37th in the nation as far as education ranking when compared to other states. Actually, in 2009, Alabama, along with two other states, had been singled out for their education progress going upward, by the way, and had even been asked to go out to other states to tell them what Alabama was doing. So our education progress was on an upward toe here. We were going forward. Today, Alabama is nationally ranked somewhere around 47 or 48 according to the National Assessment of Education Progress. We've kind of fallen. Now, how could we fall from 37th to 47th with a supermajority of Republicans in the House and Senate? Just think about it. Last year, I submitted a bill through a House representative. It was House Bill 440. That bill did three specific things. It removed the Common Core State Standards and had us go back to the curriculum we were using when we were actually making a positive progress on education. Also, it denied or prohibited us from using any semblance of Common Core State Standards. The second thing it did, and let's see how many people know this is happening today. The second thing it did was it stopped the counselors from placing students on a career track in grade 8. Every public school, grade 8, that child, it's a data-driven program, and the counselor sits down with them and develops a 4-year education career plan.
Can you do it?
All right? In every public school system in the state of Alabama. That bill prohibited the counselors from doing that because that gives the state a tremendous amount of influence in deciding where that kid's going to end up for life. The third thing the bill did, and to me the most important thing the bill did, was it stopped this actual, and I'm not exaggerating when I say it stopped the indoctrination program, the national education program that's being used in all Alabama public schools in all Alabama public school grades K through 12. It did all three. Now, to be truthful, when I drafted the bill, I kind of put like about 2 lines on the national program, and I put a couple of lines on stopping the counselors from using the data and placing kids on the career pathway. Most of the bill was spun over the Common Core state standards. If it had not been for the Alabama Federation of Republican Women, that bill would have stayed on a strong, so-called strong conservative Republican woman's desk that's head of the Education Policy Committee, her name being Terry Collins, who Dee Vocal and them can tell you has stopped any bill that was going to make substantive changes to education and remove the federal government from our decision making. She has never let go to committee that we have submitted anyway. So the Alabama Federation of Republican Women, they got active in this, and we were able to get the bill off Terry Collins' desk to the committee. And that was under the COVID rules. Still, Terry Collins would not allow the bill to be voted on. So we went through all the process of a committee hearing. She wouldn't allow the vote. Now, the policy of the Alabama GOP is they are against Common Core state standards. Can you imagine that bill coming up for a vote? Can you imagine any Republican not voting for that bill? Right? It's policy for the party. That bill didn't get a vote. The reason I'm saying this is the program I'm going to talk to you about, the actual harmful program I'm going to talk to you about. I have talked to a lot of elected leadership up here in North Alabama. And the things I have learned over the years is they'll come to you and they'll talk here, and they're going to tell you what they want to, what you want to hear, and they're going to tell you how they're safeguarding what they can of your values and principles. All the while trying not to go against the lobbyists' big interest money in Montgomery. I'm telling you, there's something there that when you go to Montgomery and you sip that Kool-Aid, Tommy Haynes, who's on this bill that y'all are in on the election machines, Tommy Haynes was just removed. He lost his election in May. He was the House rep. Tommy Haynes was one of the most God-fearing conservative people. He was actually what we called, I think George Berry will tell you, Tommy Haynes is a Tea Party conservative. But he got moved because he would not go to Montgomery and compromise his values and your values. He wouldn't compromise your values for the big money just to stay there and collect another $50,000 a year and do a head nod the way they tell you to nod the head. I just want you to know, we got people like that. You don't have a lot of them, but you do have some. You don't have a lot of them over here. So why am I here tonight? Well, let me back up. Under Tommy Haynes, this year I figured out that if I put Common Core in any legislation, Common Core sucks the air from the room. Everybody wants to think they know everything about the term Common Core, and they want to harp on it and the pros and cons for that. So this time I figured out, let's just get a bill that attacks the indoctrination program to remove it. Because in my opinion, I'd rather have people with a little less education, poorly educated or not as well educated as they should be, versus someone that's been indoctrinated into this liberal agenda, which we're going to look at in just a moment. That bill, House Bill 457, that Tommy Haynes submitted for me, never got off the so-called conservative Republican chair of the Education Policy Committee's desk. It never saw the daylight of a committee hearing. So why am I here tonight? I'm going to try to have some more legislation late in the fall, pre-filed before the legislature goes back to work. And I'm going to ask y'all in the fall, I'm going to give you more detailed information on that legislation, and hopefully you can put some pressure on your conservative leadership up here in North Alabama to actually push this legislation through and protect the kids. Next slide.
You may have trouble. I gotta make sure this.
It's true that there are dangers on the outer planets. So with so many social and medical advancements we can bring to the Independents, why would they fight so hard against us?
We meddle.
River?
People don't like to be meddled with. We tell them what to do, what to think. Don't run, don't walk. We're in their homes and in their heads, and we haven't the right. We're meddlesome.
River. We're not telling people what to think. We're just trying to show them how.
This is a design document from the Alabama State Department of Education, and when you read it, it's full of support systems. It goes everything from clinical to drugs to you name it, it's in here. But when you read this document, it's only like about 15 pages, you would have to ask yourself exactly where is the parent? Who is raising my child? That was written in 2015, I believe. All right. Thing that y'all need to be watching the horizon, they passed some bills this year that would be termed under mental health. They're really getting into the health and support programs. I'm just throwing that out for your general knowledge, but this is the type of support systems when they start talking about support systems. Well, we're going to take away the discipline, the traditional discipline. We're going to come up with alternative forms. We're going to start looking at mental health discipline. Ask your senator about mental health. Ask your senator and House reps about House Bill 171. So, next slide. Well, big money before I get into the meat. Next. Next slide. You just saw from the Joe Biden, and it says, I'm going to give you $122 billion. That letter was written in March of this year. And he's going to give $122 billion to help meet the mental health, social, emotional, and academic needs of our students. By the way, social and emotional are two different things, right? It's not social emotional learning. Social as well as emotional learning there. So, okay, next slide. There's a lot of money invested in this. So I know I'm talking to a room with various degrees of expertise and knowledge on a variety of subjects. For example, CRT, transgender, and all those. Everyone's got an opinion. Everyone maybe has some experience with that. I'm actually, to a degree, somewhat thankful with the COVID of keeping the kids home for a little bit, because the parents actually started, I think many parents started to pick up on some of the things that were being introduced to their kids. Anybody in here have any of those experiences? I've heard some moms talk about it. Okay, I got one head nod in the back. What I don't want you to do is look at what I'm about to present, and we're about to get to the meat. I don't want you to look at what I'm talking about through a prism of biasness. I think if you look at the big picture of what I'm going to be talking to you about, CRT is just a part of this indoctrination program. Transgender is just a part of this indoctrination program. There's an actual, I'm getting ahead of myself, but there's an actual strategic national program where all this is interwoven. Next slide. So I'm going to be talking about this national program. It's planned, it's structured. You're going to see these words later on in slides and quotes from the Alabama State Department of Education's own documents. It's systematic. It starts in grade K, goes all the way through grade 12. It's constructing the values, beliefs, and concepts and attitudes of every child in public school. I don't care if it's Madison, Huntsville City School, or it's in the county. Just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not there. It's indoctrinating all the kids. Next slide. This is at today. I'm going to focus you. Everybody know the mission. This is actually kind of a stealthy program because it's, don't blame the teachers. This program actually comes in through the side door of the classroom through the counselors. Everything, the next slides I'm going to be showing you, I'm probably off their screen. I'm going to get yelled at in a moment. But this is the Alabama State Department of Education's counseling document. And everything I'm going to tell you, pretty much most of these quotes pretty much come from here. I can point them out to you if you want to see them. Now, the interesting thing about that document is that they actually tried to update that document in 2015 with this right here. This is a 2015 draft of the counseling plan. We were reviewing these things, and we had a very large SAVE following as well as some other groups. And when they went out on their 3 required public hearings on this, we met them on the 2nd and 3rd public hearing, and there was very volatile, lively discussions on the subject. Parents saying, we don't want you raising our kids. Those are our kids. That's not your business. So that was in March. They actually scheduled those public hearings during spring break, just so you know. And in June, at the Alabama State Department, State Board of Education, they were going to meet, and that draft was on the agenda. A whole bunch of us from North and South Alabama went into that room. Dr. Bice, who was the state superintendent at the time, removed that document off the agenda. We thought the issue was dead because the biggest thing there was the indoctrination piece, because you just can't accept a school indoctrinating your kids, taking over raising your kids. You remember the previous slide where I showed you these support systems that had been implemented, and they had implemented the counseling program? It had to do with also the discipline issue and the mental health issue. You know when that communication between the Alabama State Department of Education and the U.S. Department of Education transpired? We met in June. Vice took that off the agenda. That document was transmitted in July, the very next month that they'd implemented that plan. What they did is they went and cut and paste those processes and that plan out of that draft document and put it in that 2003 old document. I tell you that because I want you to understand you really need to know what you're talking about, and you don't need to just take somebody and judge them with your values. And you need to verify what they're telling you. They're pretty crafty. Matter of fact, when we were up here in the Mertz Center at the second public hearing, it was a Dr. Cleveland that was doing running the public hearing, and when the parents got extremely loud and volatile, he turned over and whispered in my ear. He says, "That plan is critical, and we can get it passed without the State Board of Education." I'm guessing they just updated the old document and did a cut and paste. The Alabama State Board of Education never went through it, and we could talk about them also, but I just don't have the time. All right, so we're going to talk about the Bedrock program alignment Alabama's using. I'm going to go into some key processes they used in the national program. I'm going to show you some examples of the values, beliefs, and concepts. I'm going to show you some expansion of the counselor's role right now in the school system, so I'll try to show how all this kind of comes together. And I'm going to give you my personal opinion and then show you the bill that I submitted this year to remove it. This is you notice the quotes, so these are not my opinion pieces now. We're looking at direct quotes from the document. Did you know that your counselors or agents have changed? I consider that an activist term. What is an activist term doing in the Alabama State Department of Education's documents? Actually, I expect the counselors to be there. Look, I love counselors. I'm not knocking the counselors, but this program, the counselors are having to carry forward if they want their job. I'm not against the counselors. I've had counselors that I love that I've taken, for example, I had one girl that her mother was trying to put her on the streets to get money so the mother could buy drugs. Those things actually happen, they're not just on TV. So I'm very thankful that we have counselors that can handle those issues. What I'm talking to you about is this national program they're implementing beneath the radar that you don't know anything about. All right, so the mission of the counseling program is to prepare every student socially, academically, and emotionally. So is this like raising my kids? They're going to prepare them socially, and they're going to prepare them academically, and they're going to prepare them emotionally. Did you know that was their mission? Okay, next slide. All right, the national plan. ASCA stands for the American School Counselors Association, and they have this thing they call the national model. Basically, it's the framework for all their counseling standards. Next slide. Alabama utilizes the national model to get all the elements they need to develop programs. So you got this national program, and it's up here, but it gives you all these other programs that filter down into kindergarten, elementary, middle, and high school. Has anyone ever designed a car or designed something where you got to start like, how big are my tires, how big are the wheels, the axle, how do I build this engine, what size battery do I use, what kind of windshield wipers am I going to use on the car, how wide is the door, how long is the door, what kind of interior I'm going to have? This national plan gives you all the bells and whistles to run it. Alabama's counseling program is aligned with the national model. Next slide. And here's why I'm talking about all the bells and whistles. The model provides information regarding how the program design, coordination, implementation, management, and evaluation as it affects the academic, career, and personal social development of the students. So that's basically the concept of a national plan. It's not just what you might see in the classroom. It's not what you see in the classroom. Matter of fact, a lot of it you don't see in the classroom because you're not in the classroom. But a lot of this is being conducted not happenstance, but in a systematic process to achieve a goal. Disregard that. I didn't take that off the slide. I should have. Go ahead, next slide. All right, now here's a kicker. Every time you see the word competencies, because we're going to be looking at those in a minute, every time you see the word competencies, I want you to think of values, beliefs, concepts, and attitudes. Every time you see the word competency, and that's been vetted. That's been vetted by the Legislative Services Agency that actually drafts bills. I'm going to show you this in a little bit. But every time you see the words competencies, be thinking of my values, my beliefs, concepts, attitudes. So this counseling program is going to ensure that every student has multiple opportunities to acquire competencies. That's another way to say they're going to indoctrinate the student to believe what they want the student to believe. We're going to take a look at a few of those in just a moment. The counseling program is an integral part of the total school program. This is not just a counseling office down the hallway that you might walk into and talk to. They're actually running a systematic program to indoctrinate your children. Next slide. All right, I apologize if you can't read this, but I'm about to show you a model of what I'm talking about on these attitudes, values, and beliefs. And before we get there, I'm going to show you the process. What they do is they show you, they got 123 of these, what they call competencies. Now, to be honest, some of them at face value look okay, but I don't know where they take them. For example, they got some on touching. I don't know how and where they go with those, but if you just read it, it sounds, well, okay, that's okay. Some of them are no-brainer, where when I read it, it goes against, for example, religious beliefs. So they're starting to get the students to think differently, or at least they're competing with the churches. And that is why I'm here tonight. Once they introduce these concepts, beliefs, values that they call competencies, they then continue to reinforce them or expand them. And all students will master all competencies, indicators, by the end of grade 12. So let me go over the 3 words here that you need to pick up on. Is they got these concepts they're going to introduce at certain grade clusters. And we're going to look at them in a minute. They introduce them here, like kindergarten through 2, 3 through 5, 6 through 8, 9 through 12. That's the grade clusters. They introduce them. Once they introduce them, they continue to reinforce them. All students will master all of these by the end of grade 12. Would you call that indoctrination? That's where I come from. I actually had a discussion with the Legislative Services Agency, and I know y'all don't know who LSA is, but they're the ones that actually write the legislation that the senators and the House reps put forward. Basically, the senators and House reps call the lawyers in from the LSA, say, I need a bill on this, or I need a bill on this, and LSA provides the bill. That's how your bills are drafted. Senators and House reps do not write the legislation. They sponsor it. I had the assistant director from LSA called me one day. We'd been going back and forth, and on the legislation I was writing under the name with Tommy Haynes, they said, we can't put the word indoctrination in there. So after some give or take, and I'm thinking, well, most people don't understand what I'm talking about, you know, and you can't send a book forward with the legislation. People either got to get it or they don't. And the word indoctrination would go a long way for people understanding how horrible this is. They're actually indoctrinating your kids. So I asked the lady, I said, what definition do you use for indoctrination? She read it off. It was the same exact definition I had used. I said, well, ma'am, that's the same definition I used. I said, they're doing this. The children aren't even aware they're going through this process. I said, the parents have no clue. There's no feedback to the parents whatsoever on this. Parents have no awareness that it's happening. I said, that's pretty, but your outcome, your committed outcome is set. I said, that's indoctrination. She said, well, you can use it when you talk to groups. You can use it when you go to a committee hearing, which we never did. But we will not put it in legislation. So much for that. Next slide. So what there is there's about 123 of these basically one-liners. As I said, some of them sound okay at face value, but I don't know where they go. Some of them do not sound okay at face value. And basically, remember the black dot, solid dot, that tells you when they're introduced. And then the open dots tell you where they continue to reinforce them. So let's take this one right here. Recognize and respect differences in various family configurations. If you have a child, and I know y'all are too young to have grandkids, but if you have a child at home that has that's been in kindergarten, first and second grade, I guarantee you he has been introduced, I can't on my word, he doesn't have to accept it, because they got what? 12 more years after kindergarten to reinforce and get them to accept this. You're talking about a 13-year-long systematic program. That's hard to get your mind around, because we're used to the McDonald's first 5 minutes, give me my hamburger and I'm out the door. They're not that fast because they aren't trying to cause any ripples. But if you got a kindergartner, first or second grade child that's been in public school, they've been introduced to the concept that they should respect two men, two women, or a man and woman as a family configuration. Next slide. There's diversity and equity and stuff too, and I'm not sure where they go with all that. I thought I would, can you hear me? I thought I would just show you this one out of grins, just to show you how subtle and evil they can be. And I call this evil, and I know that kind of diminishes the impact of my presentation, because y'all really don't think people can be that evil. You really don't think that we're in a spiritual war. You think this is all, you may think different opinions, but you really don't believe that this is a spiritual war we're in. And I'm seeing some very sinister tactics on their part. Use assessment results in education planning. That's introduced in grades 6 through 8. That sounds pretty harmless, right? Use assessment results in education planning. What happens in grade 8 that I told you about at the beginning of my presentation? In grade 8, every student in public school sits down with a counselor. The counselor uses a data-driven program to assist that child and put that child on a career path called a 4-year education career plan. That is a socialist template that we have evolved to in the state of Alabama. Now, you can say it's all for the child, because it is all for the child, right? They can justify anything they're doing. But you now have a socialist template where you've given the state a tremendous amount of influence in deciding where that child goes in grade 8, where he goes in high school, and where he's going to go after high school.
Right.
Understand the importance of equity and access and career choice. That's introduced in grades 3 through 5. Are you kidding me? I couldn't spell equity in grades 3 through 5. I had no questions. You'll have quick Q&A later. So I'm just saying there's 123 of those. They're basically one-liners. Key in on the words respect, if you will, as well as the other engaging words. Next slide. Did you know that counselors have curriculum? You don't think of a counselor as a teacher, do you? Anybody think a counselor is a teacher? How many people have kids in grades 1 through 5? Anybody? Grandkids? I bet you if they're going to school, they're meeting with a counselor on a systematic, at least twice a month, scheduled with a counselor. Matter of fact, when I was making this presentation earlier this year, I had a retired teacher tell me, I used to have to take my class to an empty classroom and leave with a counselor for 30 minutes. It's happening here in Madison, I guarantee you. It's happening in Huntsville City Schools. It's happening in Madison County Schools. This isn't new. Just because you don't know about it doesn't mean it's not happening. Anyway, these are basically, if you notice the quotes, these are not my opinions. It's a school guidance curriculum. It's structured. It's presented systematically. It goes from kindergarten through 12th grade. Everybody pick up on that? A systematic program that goes from kindergarten through 12th grade. Counselors can basically come into the classroom if they have to lead to the acquisition of competencies. What are competencies again? Values, beliefs, concepts, attitudes. Basically, they can come in. What this program also does is it justifies bringing in outside groups, outside speakers, outside activities into the school. So it's not just the counselor carrying the weight. This program justifies spending monies to bring in other activities that support these competencies. It is the master plan. Next slide. Counselors implement a planned, sequential program. There's those words again, planned, sequential. I didn't use systematic this time. Program of large group activities designed to teach competencies. Remember I told you the counselors have their curriculum and the counselors are teaching. This is their quotes from the Alabama State Department of Education document, not my own comments. Counselors, did you know counselors can participate or participating in the review and revision of academic curriculum materials? Now, why do you think a counselor would be doing that? Could it be that they are aware that certain curriculum support or to introduce or reinforce their competencies that they have to introduce and reinforce? That they're able to sway or at least help manage some of that curriculum that will help introduce or support their competencies that they're required to present to the children. Next slide. I had a friend of mine say, why, when this person was in the school, in an elementary school, I said, did you know counselors do this? They said, yes, the counselors on our ARI committee, Alabama Reading Initiative Committee, but says, we don't understand why she's there. She doesn't have anything to do with academics, but she does have her own curriculum and she is teaching your kids. Maybe not as blatantly obvious as the teacher in the classroom. What really gets me is the counselors are monitoring the kids by data to determine if their actions, how their actions are starting to impact the children. Remember, they're trying to take the kids and take them and look at I will respect two men, I will respect two women, and I will respect a man and a woman as a family configuration, as an example. How do you monitor that the kids accepting this? Because maybe they're going to a church, a strong church family, their parents are very religious, but the intent is they're going to get the kids to thinking, oh, it's okay. What's wrong with it? But the teachings of the church may say, that's not okay. This is a direct quote. This means data should be collected to validate certain counseling and guidance activities, as well as determine if any change in student perception and behavior has occurred as a result of counseling and guidance activities. So they're actually collecting data on every kid that's in the school system to determine how far or how accepting the kids are going with these concepts that are being introduced and reinforced to them. This one says the same thing. Counselors, and these are quotes, counselors of data-driven school counseling programs are able to determine what, if any, student change has occurred. Doesn't that bother you just a little bit? Next slide. Here's a summary of those slides with the counselors' input. They have their curriculum of structured experiences and is presented systematically grades K through 12. They implement a planned sequential approach to teach the competencies, those 123 concepts, values, beliefs, and attitudes. They can come in the classroom to reinforce the competencies. They can actually impact the academic curriculum materials, and they're monitoring the students' perception and behavior as it relates to the students accepting the competencies that are being introduced and reinforced. Is that indoctrination? Because sometimes you hear people talk and they use words just to try to push an emotional button. I'm not at the emotional button piece. I know some of you have seen kids and what they've been introduced to in the school systems. I know that has bothered a lot of you. I'm giving you the strategic plan that allows them to bring in the programs, the people, as well as the program being run on a weekly basis with the counselors in the school system. Next slide. All right, teachers can reinforce follow through on concepts. Next slide. Here's my bottom line. Alabama's has vastly expanded its mission to include controlling how students think and act about various social and liberal issues / concerns. When all of you think of academic, school or education, you're thinking academics. I'm telling you, I don't know, and we could talk about academics. I could stay up here for hours on academics. Academics is one thing, but I don't know what's as important to them today, especially coming down through the federal government with the diversity and equity guidelines. I don't know if it's more important to get the kids an academic education or make sure the kids are aligned to be successful socially and emotionally in today's society. But you have 3 parts of school today. When a kid's in school, there's 3 issues. Academics, thank goodness we got academics in there somewhere. The career, where's that kid going to go when they get out of high school? And the third one is their personal social development. Those 3 things are constantly ongoing in your school system. You're thinking academics. Next slide. Okay, this is the bill that Legislative Services Agency drafted. A lot of heartache because you know it doesn't present the briefing I just gave you. But when you deal with lawyers, and by the way, y'all have a great lawyer I know helping y'all, Larry B. Kraft, who's a friend of ours back there. He will he will be fighting on this lawsuit for you. But anyway, getting back to this legislation, dealing with the lawyers, they would only let me give bottom line stuff that they saw the documents on. So this says the American School Counselors Association National Standards and Competencies. Basically, let's go back up here. This bill would prohibit the State Department of Education, public K-12 school officials, teachers, school counselors, or any private or public organization affiliated with Alabama public K-12 schools from implementing or maintaining any program that uses American School Counselors Association national standards and competency indicators or any variation of these standards designed to direct Alabama public school students' perception of the American School Counselors' view of concepts, values, attitudes, and beliefs used in the process of introducing the competency indicators at selected grade clusters, then reinforcing them with the expectation that all students master the concepts by the end of grade 12. I thought I was lucky just to get that into the legislation. I was hoping we would get legislators to read it. They would not let me put the word indoctrination in here. I was trying to put the word indoctrination right there, using the indoctrination process of introducing. And the lawyers would not let me have it. I thought if any person, any so-called Republican or Democrat, this shouldn't be a Democrat or Republican issue. This should be a parent issue, and these are my children, and I'm not giving them over to the state to raise. I will tell you, I've had an experience with a key Republican when I went up to push to get this legislation forward. I showed, opened the document. I showed them all the competencies. I showed them the timelines of when they introduce these concepts, and it's a no-brainer when they say all students will master all of these. And his response to me was, well, a lot of these kids don't have parents. This is a key Republican. If I said the name, every one of you would recognize it. And I looked at him and I said, we have not turned over the keys of raising our kids to that liberal, self-serving, $7.5 billion education cloning industry called the Alabama State Department of Education. But that's the thing we're dealing with when we're trying to get legislation to stop these processes. You would think any Republican that could look at the documentation and read this would stand up and say, we got to shut this down. If you shut this down, a lot of what you would call SEL, what basis would they have to bring it into the classroom once you shut this program down? This affects every public school, every grade, every student. Next slide. Good luck on trying to get your representatives and people to understand how dire this is. They are constantly fighting battles and they have wolves at the door. After I leave here tonight, next time y'all meet, you will have a wolf at your door. The wolf's not at your door. He's at your child's throat. This isn't a game. And I didn't come here to run for an office. I'm here trying to get somebody to stand up to protect these kids. Let your elected officials know we demand action. I have a website with pretty much all this material on it, at least up through this year. Good luck if you can handle it. AlabamaSave.com. You can go to that. You can pull up the Alabama State Department of Education document over there where all these quotes come from. You can see a handout you can print off that kind of gives you a one-page summary of everything I've said. If you got any questions, my wife will tell you I will pretty much go anywhere, do whatever I can to try to fight this evil. I used to blame it on Common Core. This isn't Common Core. This is a totally separate indoctrination program. Standards do not indoctrinate. And if we're able to get the bill drafted and get it to the committee next session, it really helps if people show up to speak out for it. I've seen the Alabama State Department of Education pump 30 or 40 people from their office, which is a block and a half away from the State House, over there and fill the room up. And then I've seen the chair of the committee take it and say, instead of the 3 minutes we're supposed to have, they take it down to 1 minute to give a bunch of people that's toting the water, and they better carry the water. They've been sent over there to fill that room up. Give them the standard comments you would expect to hear, the same comments we've been hearing since 2014. So that's my presentation. I hope you got something out of it. I hope this is no longer a Mike Parsons issue. When you hear this presentation, this is everybody that cares about the kids. And I know you're fighting a lot of battles. But who's protecting the kids? And it's not a game. They're in this for the long haul. Thank you. I'm supposed to answer questions. I've told you everything I know. Anybody have any questions for me? Oh, by the way, I have some of my cards up here. It's got the website and my home phone number and my email address. So if y'all want to get some of those, and contact me. But nothing I know is classified. It's just open source documents. My wife will tell you, I just don't have a life. I'll sit and read the documents. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, our daughter graduated last year from Huntsville City Schools, and she did not get as good of an education as our son did, who's 8 years older, and her whole class is extremely liberal. You know, and all we can do is just, my husband and I, is just live our lives and try to teach her. But, you know, they do indoctrinate them. That I do believe. And the other thing I was going to say is, unfortunately, in this runoff, our District 20, the person who got in the seat, he was funded by the AEA, Alabama Education Association. So they work to get the legislators that they want.
Yes, ma'am. I've heard people point to the AEA. I could mention other organizations like the BCA and others.
He did get money from them too.
The BCA, every time I've gone to Montgomery to talk about the education reform agenda, I'd be on the pro mic for the bill, and BCA would be on the con mic.
Yeah, he got money from them as well.
But what I want you to remember is that there's a real national program Alabama's using, and we've got to stop it.
They want the money, though. Huntsville City is not going to give up the money. The other thing is, based on your...
Well, if we remove the program
then,
from the state, they don't get a choice, do
right.
they?
And no, and also have been wondering why Rex Davis did not win his seat for the Alabama school board. This Wayne Reynolds did. And Wayne is a yes man. So now based on what you're saying, I understand why Rex didn't win, because he would have spoken out against this.
I can't comment on either one of those, but I will tell you there's a lot of things I just don't have time to talk about, but there's a group of us that work with the State Board of Education. There's a lot of Republicans on the State Board of Education that me and others have presented a detailed, documented presentation to, just on, like, let's say, the Common Core state standards. And these Republicans on the State Board of Education have ran their platform, their campaign, on repealing Common Core. It only takes 5 Republicans on the State Board of Education. There's only 9 people there, right? Governor Ivey is on the board. We cannot get 5 Republicans, and we should be. This is the Alabama GOP policy. We can't get 5 of them to stand up to say remove the Common Core state standards by whatever name they're being called today. So there's a lot of issues. This is the indoctrination. I can talk to you Common Core state standards all day. I can talk to you about the State Board of Education to some extent. I actually ran for that in 2014.
Hey, I'm running for school board in District 4. I just filed Tuesday. For a local school board, is there anything that they can do, we could do if elected? And
There's not a thing you can do.
oh, very encouraging. Thank you.
Well, there's smoke and mirrors. The key part, if I was an elected official, I'd make people aware. I'd make them aware of this. You can't dispute the documentation. What you do is you water it down and hit or miss. If you go to people, they say this is happening in this school, this teacher says they don't know anything about it. Remember, teachers aren't really in this thing. But basically, that's like you saying we're not going to use the Alabama College Career Ready standards anymore. You don't get a vote in that. It's a state policy. You don't get a vote. You have to follow through.
I just want to thank you for everything that you're doing. I see your passion. I feel it. Thank you. You mentioned during your presentation that this curriculum or this whole setup allows for visitors or different entities to enter and help. Now, has any conservative or Christian groups took advantage of that, like taken advantage of that, because most likely they will say no, that can cause a firestorm of on media coverage. To me, all of this, once people find out more and more of it, then people will hopefully get off their seats and do something. But maybe if the conservatives, the churches, because everyone's trying to indoctrinate, everyone's trying to, reach these kids, take advantage of the open door, get in the schools, and say the opposite of what they're saying, and then there's definitely going to be an issue to emerge, and then we can get this, just more people can hear about it or whatnot.
Well, I have dealt with pastors. What would actually get it done, I'm hoping that's why I'm here today, is one, I can show you everything you saw in quotes today in the Alabama document. It's not subjective. I'm not guessing or just trying to word it the way I want it to sound. But every one of you now know, and you can go to this website and pull the document down if you really are that bored and have nothing to do. But what you can do is you can start saying, instead of SEL, we got this in this class, I saw this with this teachers, teachers are taking the blunt of this. What you can do is tell people there's a real program, a systematic, strategic program that's running this whole thing. I suspect it's not just running in Alabama. I suspect it's running in almost every state in our nation. From the timing as we transitioned and we were spearheaded in this education reform agenda, and that's what they called it, education reform, right here. As we transitioned over, it started changing our education. We started having to address the equity and diversity issues. Now, this is Mike Parsons' opinion. My personal opinion is that we were forced to transition to this national model to address the diversity and equity issues the federal government was demanding of us. By the way, this is aligned with the Alabama College Career Ready standards, just so you know. Yes, ma'am. Oh, I'm sorry.
Hi, Teresa Smith. Who did you say is pushing this agenda? Is this the teachers union?
This isn't pushing the agenda. The program's being used by the Alabama State Department of Education. It's in every school, every public school system.
We referenced DCA, and
Or-
DCA is a nightmare from hell.
Okay.
Are you talking about people that would protect it? I will tell you, you remember when I told you I had legislation last year, House Bill 440, that would have removed Common Core, stopped the counselors from using data to place kids on a career path, and remove this indoctrination program? Remember that when I first started? A key, very key Republican told Dee Vocal over there when she said, are we going to be able to repeal Common Core? My understanding is we'll have to wait and see what the BCA says about it. Is that right, Dee? We won't mention his name, but if we mentioned his name, I'm telling you, the vetting process for getting people that serve the people instead of the lobbyists is your challenge, and I don't know how you do it because they all know what to say to you when they're running.
Mr. Parsons,
Mike.
Okay. I completely believe what you're saying. And the reason I say that is because in 2017, I went back to college to complete my political science degree. Our political science classes, I noticed a tremendous change from the last time I was there in 2014. And the change that I noticed was that my professors would come in. If there was a engineer class that was a basic political science class, and our professor would come in every day just fuming because she was not able to get that engineer class to buy into the new program, the new language that was going on. So when many of the questions that she would ask the students, and it was in particular the honor students who were young, much younger, and she would ask them, by the time they get to college, she says they've had their parents. She said, telling them what to believe. How can we get them earlier? So this alarmed me, and I would share this with my friends, but I could not get them to understand. So when COVID happened, and then the whole movement started going on, and everything just came into full picture, and I thought, this is a movement. This is what they've been planning. And I remember my professor in 2014 telling me, Teresa, the movement has started and there's no stopping it. So I completely agree with what you're saying. And it's not false. I saw it in the classroom. I heard my professor asking the young students, the honor students, to brainstorm as to how they can come in and get the kids earlier. And I think this is what is happening.
To my best estimate, because I don't know when they actually implemented it, 2015 they said they had implemented the plan. I don't know when it actually started, but this either started somewhere around 2016, 2017 timeframe. But at a point in time, if we don't get this program removed, don't remove those competencies, don't stop that reinforcement of indoctrinating the kids. If we don't stop that, we haven't seen a 12-year, 13-year product come out of the pipeline of student talent pipeline yet. We haven't seen a kid start in kindergarten and go away through the 12th grade with this program. But if we do, I don't think you're going to put that genie back in the bottle anytime soon. Stand up.
Thanks, Mike. That was great. We need to get your bill through when they open up again. The thing I want to respond over here. Last year when I went to Martin Luther King on Constitution Day, if you have a message to take, it's a law now that they get this, and you can work something through that. And the kids were so responsive. In fact, I believe that teacher would have let me in to do some more weekly work, and I didn't follow through on that. But there are a lot of teachers, if you'll develop some relationships, you may be able to do more than you think you can. It's amazing.
I agree with that, but again, I'm going to bring everyone back into focus on what I presented up here in quotes. This isn't, yeah, you can try to get into the classroom on the religious side, but actually if you're a religious side, you're conflicting with what they're trying to teach the kids. One more time, this is a planned, systematic, strategic program. So you can maybe get in there and talk to a group of kids. Everybody know how many kids there are in the state of Alabama? There's about 750,000-ish. Everybody know how many teachers we got in the state of Alabama? About 50-something thousand-ish. Teacher ratio to students 1 to 14. What I'm trying to tell you is this is a planned, systematic, strategic process. It's not hit or miss. So you can get in there and talk to the kids and think you're making an impact, but from kindergarten through grade 12, it's going to be minimized.
Okay, we have one question here, and then Dr. Calderwood has a question.
Mike, you had mentioned that there's a few things we can do, but we have a gentleman here who's running for school board. Does the school board not have, they may not have the opportunity to shut it down within their school system, but does the board member not have the opportunity to not hire these extra counselors? The legislature has passed legislation to hire multiple numbers of additional counselors for next year. But cannot the local school board shut that down?
Those counselors are on the mental health issue, which...
Mike, it's tier 1, 2, and 3. It's
I know,
all 3 tiers.
I know they did an amendment to the bill to take away from the tier 2. Those counselors are being hired to work the mental health issue, I believe. But if I was in his seat as a local school board, the best thing I could do is, because you have a voice, when you get a title, maybe the newspapers will pay attention to you a little bit. You know, you have a title then, school board member. So all of a sudden you have credibility when you say something. Just like a senator or a house rep, when they say something, you automatically are conditioned to give them some acceptance of credibility. If I was in your position, when you get to be school board, I can think of no issue more dangerous and harmful and critical to our kids than this indoctrination program. And I will tell you, they're good at sidestepping and getting you to look left when you should look right. For example, the legislation that went, that I submitted with Tommy Haynes this year, House Bill 457. The emails we were getting on that was, oh, come look and see what good, you know, how good, what good things we're doing for the kids. Not a single one of them denied what the process was. Not a single one denied. Now, I did read some letters, resignation letters from some counselors that had said, I just can't do this. But counselors are human. They're good people, but there's no Medal of Honor winners there, if you will. They're just humans like us. They're trying to put bread on the table. They don't want their names in light. They don't want a red dot on them. They're just trying to get through. So if you get up to where you can retire, you have that option, you can retire. Not many of them will just step down and throw a career away.
Okay, last question, Dr. Calder.
I enjoyed your presentation, and I think it's horrible to indoctrinate our kids. I think it may be, in my pea brain, it may be more effective in your presentation to give us examples, and specifically with quotes like you have, of what they are indoctrinating our kids to do. That can fire up parents when they see this is what they're trying to indoctrinate them to do, and it's completely opposite of your values. That's what this program is about. Because they couch it in a way that looks like, oh, this is helping kids to reach career decisions and to move forward. But if they know what this indoctrination is all about, that would put some fire in these parents.
Thank you.
And what are the values that they're trying to indoctrinate into our kids?
Thank you.
Well, there is in the career readiness, well, actually, when you're in 8th grade. When you get into 8th grade. Okay, so when you get in the 8th grade, for both my children, I had to sign saying that once they were on this career path, that they could not get off of it. So that is, you get a slip home from your counselor, you meet with them, and they say, okay, if you start on this program, you fill out the whole entire 4 years, and if you're in the honors program, you stay on the honors program. If you're on the other track, you stay on that track. You sign as a parent and you're thinking, well, both my kids, it's like, well, that's okay, you know, they're trying to help them, but you don't realize how much of that, and if you do try to change, how difficult it is to get off that path.
Yeah, just for your info, I could go down into the weeds. That's where the parents are. I know I could push your emotional buttons. What I was trying to do is give you a baseline structure that you cannot deny that they're running this indoctrination program. If you get nothing from what I said, other than this program exists and it's affecting every kid, which is what the slide said, that's good enough for me. I can bring parents in here. Matter of fact, there's another presentation where I had two fathers come up after me and give you personal experiences they had with their superintendents in the school. I know about the emotional buttons. I'm talking to you as adults. I'm not trying to get your emotional buttons. I want you to understand this program exists and what it's doing. Okay.